Yo guys, and welcome to a new video. Today I will rank down the entire Final Destination franchise. Alright, so in celebration of Final Destination Bloodlines finally hitting movie theaters last week, I thought it was the perfect opportunity and the perfect time to finally watch all the Final Destination movies, because I had not seen any of these movies before around 2 weeks ago. So I thought if I want to go watch Final Destination Bloodlines in movie cinemas, I really do need to see the rest in this franchise. So that's what I did. I have seen, of course, some of the clips online, but I hadn't seen the real movie coming with those clips. So I had seen a lot of the devs before, but I haven't seen the story that was coinciding with that. And I have to say, if I need to talk about Final Destination, it's not what I expected it to be. It's something far more simple than I ought it to be. It's more like just Dev is coming and Dev has a plan, and if you fuck up the plans, Dev's plan, then you will die nonetheless. I thought it was something very big going on with some sinister scheme and maybe even some, don't know how to say it, some supernatural stuff going into it. No, it's just mostly very coincidental death things that will probably never happen in real life. But you know, it happened, and I genuinely liked the kinds of stories that they were trying to tell. I have to say, I'm not a particularly big fan of the Final Destination franchise. I do think it's kind of overrated in my opinion. I am not a person that franchise was made for. I thought the concept was simple, but to pump out 5 movies in that was a bit much. And if you talk about Final Destination Bloodlines, that changes the story a bit, and I do think that one is more interesting because of it. So with that being said, I am not the biggest fan of the franchise, but I do appreciate some of the scenes, some of the depths, and some of the gimmicks that it tries to tell. So here I am ranking down all the 6 movies within this franchise. And the number 6, I have placed The Final Destination, the 4th one in the franchise. I ultimately gave it 1 star out of 5. I really did not like where this was going. The story was again the same. It was not that interesting. They steered away a little bit from what we knew about Final Destination, about some of the other devs and the other movies. The connections were less in there. Tony Todd wasn't in it. And mostly the kills were just very annoying. I thought they weren't as interesting as I have seen them before. I thought they were kind of repetitive, and something I started noticing within this movie is that they kind of use the same trope a lot more, and especially within the 5th one, which I also really didn't particularly like for that matter, is the kills always end up in the same way. They have this giant build-up, which is awesome, and then they finish the kill off in a completely underwhelming way. And that's something I really hated with this movie. I have to say, the characters, not that interesting, not even as meat sacks. It was just a sore to watch through, and I really did not like The Final Destination. In 5th place, we have Final Destination 3. For some, the best out of the franchise. For some, the least out of the franchise. For me, it wasn't really that interesting. I do recognize some opinions that people have with this one that I do really agree with. That is that Mary Elizabeth Winstead, what the fuck are you doing in this franchise, by the way? She did a phenomenal job, and she was easily the best part of the franchise up until that point. The kills were interesting, the kills were nice, the kills were kind of funny. I did like them, but I did not like the overarching story that they were trying to tell, and also how they steered away from the first 2 movies a bit, which was main terms of the story. Like, the first 2 are easily connected and they built upon the story, which was awesome in the second one and awesome in the first one because they built upon the idea of death coming after you. This one is just a revamp of the first one, but less enjoyable, less good, with a lesser story, and just less interesting. I gave it 2.5 stars. In 4th place, I have Final Destination 5. As I said before with the Final Destination, I do think the kills were pretty lackluster in this one, and that's mainly because of everything that is surrounding it. I mean, if you haven't seen that movie, go back, watch it now. I'm gonna spoil something about it because Jesus Christ, it's been like 2011 since that movie released. It's been 14 years, you had some time. I genuinely think that the kills are all pretty damn fucking boring and they ruined every single one of them. They always end up in the same way. They have this big giant 5-minute long build up to a kill, which is awesome because the build up is just very, very good. And then they end it off by just gravity. The best thing I can think of is the one in the gym where everything else with the nail and the thing getting loose on the top where she has to spin, it's all building up to some horrific death, and then it's just someone falling down, a big bag of sand, like this friction sand, blowing in someone's face, and she just lets go of the pole and lands on her back and breaks in half. That was pretty fucking lackluster. And then you have the laser eye thing, which I thought was pretty gruesome to watch. And you have that end by dropping her out of a window. Again, gravity. That was so incredibly lackluster, and I really, really hated that. And I did consider putting this one on my last or my least favorite place of this list, up until the moment came where they thought they were free after a pretty mediocre final event, which I even didn't think of as the final event of the movie. I thought we were just like going towards the end, but it was the actual end. And then the movie saved itself by a genius stunt by making this a prequel where you have some hints off inside of the movie. I saw the hints, like there's a year somewhere on the background and you can tell, it's 1993, 1996. The first movie took place in 2000. That's interesting. It's a prequel. And then they ended it by putting them on Flight 180, which was a genius twist back then and still holds up right now. Even though I did know that was going to happen. The ending, the way they shot it, was great. Final Destination 5, I ultimately gave 2.5 stars as well. Coming in hot in our third place is the OG, the original Final Destination. I did think this was a pretty fun movie. I had fun with it, but I was also a little disappointed by it. I do think the kills in this one were the most interesting, and I really loved what they did with the kills and how gruesome they sometimes were and how interesting they made everything. I was very bummed out about the role for Tony Todd though. I thought he was going to have a big role in this franchise. He only had a small little cameo in it, which I thought was a pretty sad move because I wanted to see more of that guy. But on the positive side of that, I also recognized that the small cameo he had was easily the best part of the movie, and that goes for every movie in this franchise. He was absolutely awesome and stole the scene every time he was on screen, even as the voice of the devil in the third one. So I really genuinely liked that, even though I did think it was a little too short. Where this movie falls short completely for me is its premise. I thought it was going to be the supernatural thing, and I was a little bummed out when I realized it was just Dev's plan that was failing and then Dev trying to get his plan to work. The way they continuously kept explaining it was like it's going to be this big fucking entity it's going to be like a devil or something that's behind this. And it's just Dev apparently, and they never even explain it, and I don't think they have explained it in any of the 6 movies, which took me until the third movie to finally realize that they were not going to do that, and made me pretty bummed out even more. But I just then genuinely didn't like the lack of explanation to things. It just happened for the sake of happening. I do think this one had the best climax out of all the movies. I gave the OG Final Destination 3 stars. And in second place, we have the second installment within the franchise, Final Destination 2. I did think the kills were less interesting, but I did not think it was that big of a problem because the story built up extremely well on the first one. It was actually really a continuation of that story, which I thought was awesome. The kills were still very interesting, especially the log scene because of, well, of course, how iconic that log truck has become and everyone knows it and everyone is still scared of it. And they used it in the marketing for Final Destination Bloodlines, which I thought was a genius move. This one I actually like a little bit more than the original because it builds on the story a little bit more. It builds on the narrative. It builds upon the idea of Dev coming back to finish what he once started. And by making it a reverse plan and stuff like that, they actually made us rethink about how this franchise would do it and how they would have to come up with a solution for it, because they did bring back one of the characters of the first one, which was awesome. I really am a big I was extremely mad when I heard that the main character from the first one, forgot his name, I'm sorry, died by having a brick fall onto his head off screen, and I would just read about it in a newspaper. That made me extremely mad, but for the rest, the movie did build on that first one really well, and that's why it's a little better than the first one in my opinion. I also gave this one 3 stars. And of course, there's only one movie remaining for my number 1 spot, and that is the latest one in the franchise, Final Destination Bloodlines. I have heard some mixed things about it. I have to say, I completely agree with everything about that mixed feeling. I thought the first half of this movie was goddamn boring. There was this opening scene, which is great, which I actually really liked, but then they tried to change the narrative a lot. I also talked about this in my movie review for it. But the narrative changes from what we have seen before from this franchise, which was interesting enough to have it changed and to have another story within this franchise and to have the idea expanded again and to have the narrative of the Final Destination franchise and the premise and the logline of it. To have that expanded was really awesome. Only the way that they did it was pretty boring and therefore pretty lackluster, and I was sad that I just didn't genuinely like it, and I was bored out of my mind with a Final Destination movie where people were supposed to die, and even though people died, I still thought it was boring. I do think this one was the funniest one, and I do think in the second half, once the movie starts kicking in, it really gets fucking awesome. It gets really good. So I was very happy with that revelation that the later half of this one is pretty good. The Tony Todd scene in this movie is the best scene in the entire franchise, and it almost made me weep a tear because of how wholesome it was. In the end, this one had a pretty lackluster beginning. It was a pretty good beginning, a little lackluster first and second act, and it also failed a little bit in its final act. But the way the story changed and the way the kills were done in the second act of the movie, when the movie really starts to kick in, was what saved this movie from being bad. And even though I did not particularly like everything, I do think this one was the funniest. I genuinely laughed out loud quite a few times, so this one is the one where I had the most fun with. I also gave this one 3 stars, and it's in first place because I genuinely liked it so much. I also decided to give it a little heart. What did you think of this one? Alright, that's my ranking of the entire Final Destination franchise. What did you think of this franchise? Are you a fan of it? Are you a hater of it? What is your ranking of the franchise? Please let me know in the comments down below because I'm genuinely excited to hear your opinion on these movies. And I want to thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you liked what you've seen here because I will do a lot more rankings in the future. Around 3 to 4 are more coming this month because we do have 3 or 4 franchises this month that will get new movies. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, and bye bye.